YouTube, what's going on? It's James and Make an Opening, and today we have a little bit of a different style of video. Today we're going to be just going over the 3 different archetypes of TCG games when it comes to deck styles and what beats what. It is a pretty big game of rock, paper, scissors, except instead of rock, paper, scissors, you have control, mid-range, and aggro. And another thing is, instead of rock, paper, scissors, where, you know, rock always beats scissors, scissors always cuts paper, paper always covers rock, it's not the exact same in card games, and especially not the same in Star Wars Unlimited. Aggro can beat mid-range decks, and mid-range decks can beat control decks, and sure enough, control decks can beat aggro decks. Especially with a tournament being in a 2 out of 3 format or best of 3 format with sideboarding available, and then, you know, luck of the draws, chance playing into it as well. You know, if you're aggro playing into control and you don't have the best draw, but your control opponent has the perfect draw to counter a aggro game, and maybe they sideboarded in cards and they see them on their draw, that game might not go so well for you. So we're just gonna kind of go over the basics of these 3 pillars of card gaming, what they work best against, what they don't work best against, some tips of here and there on how to play all 3 of these archetypes in Star Wars Unlimited, and then we're also going to go over some of the leaders that you can play with these archetypes. So without further ado, let's hop right into it with the first category being aggro. So first up, we have aggro. Currently the face of aggro in Star Wars Unlimited is Sabine Green, this lady right here, which is why I'm giving her the spotlight. But there are other aggression decks, or not aggression like the aspect, but aggro decks. I'm just gonna keep it saying it as aggro. But as you see, best against control, worst against mid-range. The win rates are going to be higher against control decks, win rates are going to be lower against mid-range decks, and that's pretty much typical across the board. Now, like I mentioned, when you utilize best of 3 tournaments, sideboards, these numbers can change. Maybe your opponent isn't the best well-versed with their deck. Maybe they have bad draws. Maybe they're bad at resourcing cards, which is a very, very good skill to have. Good resourcing is a good skill to have in this game. Games can always go in either direction, and that's for every archetype we're going to be covering today. Now, with aggro, heroic is the way to go. There's just so many more pieces that hero cards have that villainy cards don't. A lot more burn cards, just a lot more really solid early game units in general. You know, you have For the Cause I Believe in, you have Battlefield Marine, just so many good hero cards that you can't necessarily play in villainy aggro style decks. Now, you could play villainy aggro. You could play Grand Moff Tarkin with Imperial Troopers, with the experienced counters, and you know, go as wide as you are going tall. And then there is also IG-88, which is going to be your standard flood type of deck. IG-88 mono red and then Tarkin red are going to be those 2 lists, but just stick with hero. Obviously there's Sabine, but there's also Leia. Both Leia Red and Leia Green are really fun, super, you know, aggressive, explosive turns as long as you can get there. And then Han Solo. I mean, Han Solo Blue, Han Solo Red. You know, I feel like Han Solo is very fast-paced, and he can really get up in there. And maybe even Cassian. I mean, if you're going Cassian Yellow, Cassian Yellow, I feel like would be a good thing. Honestly, I feel like Sabine Yellow, Han Red, and Cassian Yellow are going to be some sleeper aggro decks coming up because of them being able to utilize cards like Force Surrender, Spark of Rebellion into those control matchups and even mid-range matchups. That way you can pluck out key pieces, you know. So, and then also take the initiative. So many times have I gone against aggro decks, I've played aggro decks, and I've seen aggro decks being played where, you know, especially with Sabine Wren, it's probably a Sabine Wren issue. They've already done all their attacks. They're looking at a board across from them where, you know, they can get off a couple more attacks on the next turn, but they decide to use their leader action to just deal 1 damage. And then their opponent takes initiative, and then with the initiative, they blow up a Green Squadron A-Wing, or they blow up the Battlefield Marine. And that's just 3 more damage you could have done by taking initiative instead of giving it up and dealing 1 damage to their base and your own. So just be smart about that. Always keep initiative at the top of your noggin when you're playing aggro. And let's go into aggro deck's worst matchup, mid-range. And who better to show off for mid-range than the king of mid-range at the moment, and honestly still probably the deck to beat and the deck to tech against in the current meta, Boba Fett. Mid-range is best against aggro, it's worst against control, and there are plenty of great options in the current meta for mid-range decks. I mean, off the top of the head, we have decks like maybe Chewbacca, Chirrut, Imwe. You have Grand Inquisitor could probably be seen as mid-range. Vader, maybe if you're going with the ramp build and not the blue control-y build. Boba Fett, obviously. Maybe Han Solo if you're going a little bit of a slower build, but plenty of great options out there in the current meta. Obviously, Boba Fett is #1 top dog at the moment, top doggy dog, but plenty of really good options, and there is different styles. So you can create tempo with either units or removal. So if you want to run more unit heavy decks where you're trading effectively, you're utilizing ECL or Energy Conversion Lab. And then there's also the removal heavy side of mid-range where you're popping units as soon as they try and play them so they can't build up a board state while you build up your own board state and beat them through a game of attrition that way. Most leaders can be built in mid-range. I mean, the ones I named off are just a few, but you technically, theoretically, you probably could build a mid-range version of Leia. You could probably build a mid-range version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. I've seen mid-range versions of Director Krennic even, and Iden as well. So it's really just, the middle ground, the perfect middle ground. And now let's just finish it up real quick, talk about control. Now with control, obviously, best matchups are into mid-range matchups and the worst matchups are into aggro matchups. I know this from personal experience. I've been playtesting my Grand Admiral Thrawn deck, getting it ready for the tournament out in Dallas here in the next couple weeks, and I have a terrible time playing into Leia. So there's changes that need to be made. Unfortunately, it's probably not sideboard changes. I may need to change up the actual main deck list, and I don't know if I want to, but I want to have a chance, so I might have to. But when it comes to control, villainy is the way to go. Almost every villainy leader in the game can control. There are 9 total villainy leaders, and about 5 or 6 if you consider the green build of Grand Inquisitor to be a more control heavy style of build. If not 5, but if you do 6 out of the 9, those leaders are going to be Krennic and Iden, of course, the faces of villainy control. You have Palpatine as well. Vader with Vader Blue has been seen as a very, very good control deck, obviously winning the floor to 5k. Inquisitor, maybe, it's up to you. And then Thrawn, of course, Grand Admiral Thrawn, probably the most underutilized one and my favorite because he's blue and he's smart and he's chiss and he's got swag. And one of the biggest tips about control is to just abuse the pass option. They have it in the game for a reason. So your actions you can take in a game, you can attack, you can play a card, you can use an action, you can take the initiative, or you can pass. And I find myself passing a lot because in a control deck, you want to be reactive. You don't want to be the active. You want to be the reactive. That way, when they play something, you react by blowing it up. You exhaust it. You send it back to their hand. You get them in their head, and you tilt them, and you make them mad. They're mad that they're sitting there playing a 30-minute game. Stuff like that. So control is going to be very much so reactive instead of active. So definitely abuse passing. In control mirrors, it can be a little bit trickier. What I like to do is just check how many resources they have available to play. If I don't think they have anything that they can play with the resources available, I take initiative before they can. That way I can just stay in control in that aspect as well. Because if I take initiative, I can pass and wait for them to do stuff before they have the option to pass first. And then also I play Thrawn, so being first if they have units and utilizing his ability to tap something down is pretty helpful in my personal experience. So yeah, guys, that's that. If you're expecting a control dominated meta at your upcoming 1k 5k store showdown, then want to bring aggro. If you're expecting an aggro dominated field, you want to bring mid-range. And if you're expecting a mid-range dominated field, you want to bring control. So if you're expecting a lot of Sabines, bring Boba. If you're expecting a lot of Bobas, bring control. I'm not going to say any specific control because, you know, it's up for debate. There's a whole lot of different control options that are really viable. But let's just say, for example, iden. If you're expecting a lot of Bobas, bring iden. If you're expecting a lot of idens, bring Sabine. And, you know, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Without the lizard Spock, actually, because there's only 3 archetypes. But let me know down in the comment section below if you learned anything, if you feel like I missed out on anything. Obviously, this is just a quick and dirty video, just quick, simple tips and tricks and insight on the archetypes and what to build, who to build, when to bring it, stuff like that. The next video will probably be a deck list video unless you guys have any other ideas for me. Until the next time, this has been James with Make an Opening. Bring a bunch of mid-range to Dallas because I'm playing Thrawn. Peace.